Okay, so as we mentioned last week, this chapter 18 to for the next bunch of chapters till 26 is sort of it's a unit for itself. And just to put it in perspective, where we're headed, we have to go back to the big picture. Okay, so let's summarize really what we did till now very briefly, last 17 chapters. So I guess if you want to go general, the first 12 chapters, or really the first 14 chapters, talk about the idea that we have two souls. And then we got into what is the soul. The soul is the 10 faculties, the understanding and the emotion. That's the soul itself. Then you have the garments, thought, speech, and action. And you have two sets of those, in other words, two set personalities, the human one, the godly one. And then the question is, if you really want to serve God, the animal soul has to allow the godly soul to express itself. And here there were the variations between the different people. So the righteous person is the person whose godly soul's love transforms the animal soul's heart, and now the animal soul itself loves God. It understands, it appreciates God, and therefore it loves God more than it loves its own physical pleasures. But that's unusual. That's the exception to the rule. That's the righteous person. Then you have somebody else who does not, the animal soul dominates the thought, speech, and action, at least to some degree. They're considered, we don't strive for that. We strive to have control over thought, speech, and action. So we strive to be the Beinoni, the intermediary person. Intermediary person, while he does not control the emotion of the heart, because the animal soul is still powerful, nevertheless, the Beinoni has control over the thought, speech, and action, the garments, and that's why he's a Beinoni. And that's the level we should strive for. However, as we mentioned, there are two reasons why you would need, that's not enough. You need emotion. You have to cultivate the love for God. Number one, because you want to serve God with your heart. You were not just a robot. And number two, because ultimately to be able to fuel this commitment of battle to control thought, speech, and action, you need some motivation. And the motivation would be the love to God. So that was really what we got to in the first 15 chapters. Then we said, okay, so how do you create a love to God? So we said, well, that's why we're called Chabad, the Chabad movement, because Chabad believes in wisdom and understanding knowledge. Meditation, meditating about the greatness of Hashem. Over time, eventually, your perspective will shift and you will come to love God. What a wonderful idea. Okay. Problem is, some people are not that intellectual and not, in other words, they're not that emotional. It's not so easy for them to awaken emotion. So Rabbi Shneur Zalman says, okay, no, don't worry. For you may not be able to, through your meditation, awaken a passionate, fiery love in your heart to God. However, you still can create semi-emotion, conviction. You understand that this is the right thing to do. You have an intellectual appreciation. The heart appreciates it. It's not burning with a passion, but that's enough to fuel the emotion. And these two forms come through meditation. Okay, fine. That's good. So all is good and fine. We can serve God. We can close the book right now. However, we have two problems. First of all, sometimes the meditation takes time. I say, if I meditate about the greatness of Hashem, how long will it take me to awaken love? I don't know. Some people it could take a day, some people a year, some people every day for a decade. Some people it's a lifetime of work to create that meditation. So we need a quicker result. We need something that a person could trigger immediately. That's problem number one. Problem number two, we're studying the Tanya, and the Tanya is based on the verse that Moses told the people. This matter is close to you. This matter is close to you in your heart, in your mouth, in your heart to do. That makes sense. All that has been explained so far to some degree. But however, the Torah doesn't just say, Moses doesn't just say this matter is near to you or accessible to you. He also puts in the word very. It is very near to you. Me'od, exceedingly so. So if you're going to tell me, yeah, it's hard, it's near to you, you can create a love to God over time through meditation. Okay, is it very near? It's near. Very near. Very is a very strong word. So what we're setting out to do in this chapter, not in this series of chapters from 18 to 25, we're going to say there's another love that you can awaken that is passionate and could be awakened, it could be created instantaneously. Remember last week we said there's the long way is meditation, then there's the short way, the second love. Why is it the short way? Why? How could this work? Because this love you do not have to create. Till now we said, how do you create a love? Meditation. Father and mother, Chachma and Bina, are the father and mother that give birth to the emotions. You want to give birth to emotion, it takes time, right? You want to give birth to a child, it takes 9 months. Emotion may take longer. So that is if you want to create emotion, meditation, that may take time. But what happens if you don't have to create the emotion? What happens if the emotion is already there? We're going to refer to it as Ava Mesuteret, hidden love. The love already exists within you. All you have to do is reveal it. Oh, that's much quicker because you're not creating it. So that's the short one. Just awaken the love you already have. Now, it's funny that even though it's the short way, just create the love you already have, there are many more chapters in the Tanya dedicated to explain how this works, right? There are 8 chapters in Tanya explaining how this works. So the long way has 2 chapters. The short way has 8 chapters. Why? Because you have to understand how to awaken it. To understand how to awaken it, you first have to understand it. So it's going to take us quite a few weeks to figure out what is this business of this hidden love. Where does it come from? How do you trigger it? What does it look like? What does it respond to? And that is what we're setting out to do. So in other words, we're setting out to figure out the meaning of the concept that there is a hidden love that already exists within a person. And therefore a person could awaken it easily, quickly. And this matter is not just near to you, the way meditation is near to you, but it's exceedingly near to you. And that's the roadmap. So that's the roadmap, what we're trying to do from 18 to 25. So that's the first introduction. Second introduction is, I think it makes sense to give an introduction, to give an overview of what we're going to do in all these chapters. In other words, what's the big idea? Can we say it in 60 seconds? And then we'll spend the next 2 months unpacking it, if that makes sense. But in the meantime, if anybody has any comments or questions on the last 17 chapters or on anything else, please share before we get ready to strap our seatbelts and move forward to figure out the next bunch of chapters and figure out how do I awaken the Ava Mesuteret, the hidden and latent and concealed love. Okay, so what are we trying to do essentially? By the way, these chapters in Tanya, some of them are very, very deep and profound. The second chapter of Tanya, the second part of Tanya, the gate of faith and belief, of unity and belief, which we discussed in the past during the summer, but we have to get back to it. That has 12 chapters. Those 12 chapters are really condensed into 1 or 2 chapters in chapter 20 and 21. So there's very deep Kabbalistic ideas coming ahead. And that's why it's going to take us some time to get through multiple chapters. But the idea is as follows. The idea is not so difficult to grasp what we're trying to achieve. What we're trying to achieve is like this. So first I'll tell it you in the words of the Tanya, and then I'll try to give a metaphor, and then you'll tell me if the metaphor resonates. And if not, we'll take the long route, read it inside, and then hopefully everything will fall into place. Okay, so what are we saying? We start by saying, look, the Jewish soul has a capacity, there's a capacity within the Jew to give over their life to God. If historically, somebody would force a Jew to renounce their connection to God or to give up their life, often the Jew would give up their life. Now, this doesn't stem because the Jew is so committed to God or so committed to religion or so committed to Judaism. Because if you look at the annals of Jewish history, you know that there are many people who were ignorant about the religion, ignorant about the faith. They were not intellectual people, and yet they still were willing to give up their life to God. Not everybody, but many people. And it's not just once, it wasn't an anomaly, over many generations. What is the takeaway? What do we see? We see, we're going to define exactly what we're talking about, but there is a part of the soul that part of the soul is ultimately one with God, connected to God, loves God. And if the choice to renounce its connection to God is given to it, it would rather give up its life than renounce its connection to God. And that every soul has it. You want to know what level of the soul? We'll talk about it. We're going to get to all the Kabbalistic terminology. But every soul has that space that's connected to God and loves God. Okay. So I ask you a question. Why is it that Jew who was willing to risk his life and gave up their life to connect to God, why is it that Jew had no connection to Judaism? Or when it came to other sins, the person could not do the right thing or make the right choice. If you want to be connected to God, so how come it only expresses itself when it comes to the question of renouncing God, and when it comes to other matters of keeping the Torah, the person would not respond in the same way? So the answer is that for whatever reason, this person, when they don't listen to God, they said that they don't follow God's commandments, or they cannot withstand the temptation to go against God's will. For whatever reason, they think that they tell themselves that my connection to God is not threatened, right? I can go against God's will, I'm still connected. And that's why that part of the soul, we're going to call it Chachma, the Chachma of the soul is not triggered because it's not threatened, because it doesn't think its connection to God is at stake. Okay, so I don't do what God wants. Doesn't matter. We're still connected. It's fine. When it comes to the question of renouncing the connection to God, here the person can no longer think that. Here the Chachma senses that its connection to God is threatened, and therefore it awakens and it activates and it takes control over the person and does not let the person succumb, because it understands that its relationship to God is at stake. Okay, that's the Kabbalistic interpretation of a historical phenomenon, that Jews who were not learned, not observant in their daily life, yet when it comes to the question of giving up their life for God, they would. Okay, that is what we're going to establish in 18, and we're going to elaborate upon it in 19 a little bit. 19 also, I should say. Okay, what's the big idea? The big idea is like this. The big idea is, if I need to awaken a love to God, I just have to awaken that's part of my soul. That part of my soul is asleep because it doesn't think the love to God is threatened. But if I can understand that essentially any commandment is really a choice of connecting or disconnecting to God, I will be able to trigger my chachma, and I will be able to get to the point where that same passion that would not allow me to renounce my Judaism would not allow me to succumb to this temptation. Why? Because my love to God is activated, because my hidden love to God is activated, because my chachma, which we'll elaborate on that on today in chapter 18, my chachma has been activated. So in simple words, if every choice is a choice about connecting or disconnecting to God, I could activate then every choice I would approach with that same passion and conviction that I would if my connection to God is at stake. And that's the big idea. That's what we're going to say from here to 25. So that's the big idea. Just to give a little metaphor, make it a little easier to understand. Let's say I love my child. Loving my child doesn't mean that every time I have to make a choice between being a good parent or being selfish. I don't mean focusing on self. I mean selfish, right? It doesn't mean I'm going to make the right choice. I love my child, but it's 10 o'clock at night. My son wants me to go upstairs and put him to bed. I'd rather sit on the couch and read. It doesn't mean, just because I love my child, it doesn't mean I'm going to put my book aside and go upstairs and put them to bed. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean I'm going to do it. Kid is 11 years old. Put yourself to bed. I don't have to come upstairs, right? I love you, yes, but it doesn't mean that I don't have my own temptation, my own desires. Okay. Now, is that a big sacrifice to put down my book and go upstairs for 120 seconds? No, but I'm not going to do it. Doesn't mean I'm going to do it. I may or may not. Doesn't mean I'm going to do it. Okay. What happens if there's a scenario where my love to my child is such that I feel that the connection is at stake. Or simple, the son is in danger. Or simple, it's at stake. One way I like to think about it, if I thought that this exact moment is the one moment that my child will remember of his childhood, would it be a big deal for me to put down my book and run upstairs? Of course not. I would give up everything for the love of my child. If I feel that the relationship is at stake, if they're in danger, for sure. But even if they're not in danger, if this is the moment that in their mind, when they think about their childhood, they're going to say, my father was there for me because on Friday night, he came upstairs and he put me to bed, or he took me on Sunday to play ball, whatever that would be. If my relationship is determined on this factor, of course I'm going to put down my book and go help them. What's the question? Right? The problem is that I'm sitting and say, I love you, but it doesn't mean I have to take you upstairs. In other words, when the relationship is at stake, all of a sudden, my perspective shifts and my hidden love comes to the surface and everything else falls away. So what do I need to do if I need to be a good parent? And my child wants me to go play ball, and I don't want to just go. I want to feel that I want to go. It doesn't take a lot of meditation. This works for me. I say, Menachem, it's possible that your child is going to remember only this event. How do you want your child to remember this? Now, do I need this? No. I mean, it could be he won't remember it. Could be I don't have to do this all the time. But if I want a jolt of meditation, of burst of energy and a burst of love, that's all I have to think about. I just have to say, this moment, our relationship is at stake. And if I think of it that way, there's no question, everything, I'll make the right choice. Same with my spouse, same with my mother, same with my grandmother, same with my children, same with everything. And then essentially, that's what we're doing with our relationship with God. If I need that extra love, I have to accept, if I need that extra jolt of energy and passion, I say, there's no such thing as this moment is really the determining factor. Am I connected to God or not? I have a choice to make. Every mitzvah is an opportunity. Am I connecting to God or not? And if that's the case, if that's the way we think about it, we will respond. And if I could make the sacrifice of sacrificing my life for God, I certainly can make a much lesser sacrifice of not doing what I want to do at this moment to do the will of God. Now, this takes a lot of explanation. Why is every mitzvah? Why does that mean the relationship is at stake? Right? So, but it's not just a statement. We have to understand it. It's Chabad. We have to understand it. Wisdom, understanding, knowledge. So it's going to take us many chapters to explain every step in this process. But the process itself is simple. The concept itself is simple. If you realize that every decision you make, your relationship with God is at stake, your hidden love that you already exists within you. How do I know? Because in a moment of crisis, you would give up your life for God, because something in your soul cannot live without a connection to God. Also, how come I don't feel it all the time? Because it's asleep. Why is it asleep? Because it doesn't feel threatened. Why does it not feel threatened? Because it doesn't realize that a relationship with God is at stake. If I could sense that my relationship with God is at stake, it will be activated. And if I activate it, I have all the energy I need, and I'll be able to do any sacrifice, smaller, that's lesser a sacrifice than giving up my life. So that's the big idea. And I think the metaphor, for me, that metaphor works, because I see how the metaphor works in my own life. Sometimes I tell that to myself. And so this is not scientific, but this is anecdotal, not a scientific survey, because it's only one person, only some of the time. But anecdotal, I could tell you, it works for me at least some of the time. So this is the introduction of what we're trying to do from 18 to 25. And in 18, before we even start anything, before we even get to the other steps of the process, the first thing we have to understand is, what is the hidden love? How do we get it? Where do we get it from? We get it from our patriarchs. It's inherited. How does it operate? And we're going to establish that idea of the chachma that every soul has. And the next week, we're going to continue on that idea. And then chapter 20, 21, 22, we talk about the unity of Hashem and how every mitzvah is really a question of, am I connecting to the unity or not? And et cetera, 24, 25, we wrap it all up together. So that's the big idea of the short way. Like I said, the short way takes 8 chapters to explain the short way, but it's the short way. Because why is it short? Because you don't have to create a love. You're just awakening one. So that's the story in short. And then we'll take the questions, and then we will read the holy words inside of chapter 18. Go ahead, Vicky.
Thank you, Rabbi. That's really brilliant and the explanation and very useful. But I'm just trying to understand from the very beginning, which Chachma are we talking about, the godly soul or the animal soul?
Godly soul. Godly soul. The animal soul's chachma does not have this capacity. But the point here is the godly soul's chachma is so powerful that it has so much energy that when it comes to a moment of crisis, it will override all other parts of the soul, both godly and animal. And therefore, a person who has no connection to God or Judaism would give up their life for Judaism. Why? If you ask them rationally why, they would say, I have no idea. Because it's not a rational thing. Rationality starts at Bina. We'll discuss that. Rationality starts at Bina. Chachma is above rationale. And all I'm trying to say is that it's not an even playing field. Once you trigger the love, the chachma of the godly soul, the amount of passion and energy it brings into the equation, everything else becomes insignificant when you have the right perspective. Just like the metaphor I said, I really want to read the book. I want to sit on the couch and eat ice cream. Okay, every part of my soul wants that, right? That's what I understand it's a good thing, and I feel that it's good, and I'm tired, and that's what I want to do. But if you can touch something deeper, something more real to you, more true to you, then everything else, all the concerns fail in comparison, right? My son calls me up. He says, could you come pick me up? No, I don't want to pick you up. I have to drive 2 hours to pick you up. But what happens if the child will call and say, oh, I just got into an accident. Could you come pick me up? Oh, everything else is insignificant. You run, you drop everything and run. What happened? What happened to all your concerns? And your animal soul wasn't happy, and you had other things on your agenda, and your calendar was full. Doesn't matter. When something deeper than that comes into the question, everything else fails into falls to the side because it's insignificant in comparison. And that's what happens when the chachma of the godly soul is awakened, as we will see in chapter 19 next week.
So what about Rasha? Does he also have that capacity?
Yes, every single soul has the chachma. Now, it's possible that, and that's why there were wicked people who did sacrifice their life for God when it came to a question of renouncing their faith. Not everybody, because not always is it awakened, right? Doesn't always awaken, but it's there. Everybody has that capacity. Every soul has all 10 sfirot. Every soul has the chachma of the godly soul. Okay. So I just want to welcome Bob. You came just in time, Bob, because we just did the summary. And Rabbi.
Thank you.
Rabbis, summary and introduction. Rabbis like to give introductions. So you missed the introduction, but you're going to get the body of the chapter. Okay. There was a rabbi who would say, growing up, he was my grandfather's friend. They would always invite him to speak. So he would say, before I speak, I'm going to say a few words. So that's what we did. Okay. So we're going to start chapter 18. And again, we're going to focus today on the hidden love that every soul has. And that will explain how it's very near to us to awaken the love to God. It's going to take us multiple chapters to explain this concept, but we begin today in chapter 18. Here we go. So I'm going to read. If anybody has any questions, please do not hesitate to stop me. You don't have to wait to the end of the chapter. Here we go. To explain more clearly and more precisely, the word very in the verse for this thing is very near to you, right? That was the verse on the cover page of the Tanya. That was the selling point, like I said. Rabbi Shneur Zalman had said he's going to explain to us the verse in the Torah that Moses says that serving God in your mind and in your heart is not only near, but very near. So we explained that it was near as in accessible. Yeah, meditation, fine. But meditation is not very near. It takes time, it takes effort. It could take a lifetime. But now we're going to explain how it's very near. So here we go. One should recognize with certainty that even the person who has only a limited understanding of God's greatness, so that he lacks the materials necessary for meditation, and he has no heart to comprehend the greatness of the blessed infinite God. His mind and heart are not suited for meditation, so that he lacks the tools for meditation. Some people are naturally more emotional. Some people are naturally more intellectual. Some people respond to abstract ideas. Some people do not respond as well to abstract ideas. But even somebody who does not have a great understanding of the greatness of God, and he feels he cannot awaken a passionate love and fear, love and awe of God, even in the recesses of his mind, as we said, to produce through meditation a fear and love, even in his mind and understanding alone. That was what we discussed in chapter 16, that there's the love in the heart, and then there's the appreciation of the mind. So even if I can't do any of this, nevertheless, yet it is a very near thing. That's again, the quote from Moses. It's very near for him to guard himself from transgressing the prohibitive commandments through a fear of God, and to practice the positive commandments which require a love of God. These together comprising all of the commandments of the Torah, and in particular the study of Torah, which counterbalances them all. In other words, study of Torah is greater than all the other commandments combined. In other words, even if I can't create the love, nevertheless, it's very accessible for me to study Torah to do it with passion. He can fulfill this in his mouth and in his heart, in the true sense of heart. That is, not only in the superficial sense of the word heart, which means to say in his thoughts, but in the true sense of with his heart, namely with feeling from the depths of his heart, in absolute certainty with love and fear. How does this work? You just told me I can't create the emotion of love to God because my intelligence and my emotion are not that developed. How do you tell me now I could serve God with truth from the depth of my heart, with love and fear? How is that possible? So the answer is because you have the hidden love. This is the hidden love present in the heart of all Jews, which is an inheritance to us from our patriarchs. So the love we were talking about till now, you have to create on your own. If you have to create on your own, you need the tools. Some people are better and some people are not as good. But if it's a love inherited to you, you have it in your bank, you have it in your trust funds, you don't have to create it. You have to access it, okay? But it exists within the heart. But to figure out how it works, how this love works, you first have to explain, but we must first preface a clear and precise explanation of the origin of this love, i.e., which level of the soul it stems from, and its character, what sort of striving this love constitutes, and how did this love become our inheritance? How does one inherit love? And how is fear also incorporated in it? So that's what we said. We have really 4 questions. If you want to talk about hidden love, so first question is, what is the root? What's its character? Root, where does it come from? There's different types of love. There's love of yearning. There's love of pleasure. There's love, all kinds of love. So we want to define what's the source, what's its character, how do you inherit it? And we also said that this love also incorporates awe. It incorporates fear, because we said you could serve God completely with your heart. Now, there's really 2 primary emotions that we serve God with. All the positive commandments are motivated by the love to God, and the negative commandments are motivated by awe or fear. So we have to say that this love actually includes both. So these are the questions. So the premise that we're going to lay out from now until chapter 25 is you can awaken. It's very easy, very accessible to awaken the hidden love. Why? Because to awaken love, because it already, and fear, because it exists. It already exists in your soul. It's hidden. Okay, fine. We have to access it. Then there's also the question for a moment that we say, how do you inherit love? So let's say you're a kind person, you're a loving person. So your children may also be loving people. So you can inherit the character traits. But just because I love a person, Yankel, it doesn't mean my child, even if he's a loving child, doesn't mean he'll love what I love. That's the question. How do you inherit love? You can inherit a loving characteristic, but you don't inherit the loves of your parents. So that's part of the question. Part of the answer is going to be, it's not love that we inherit. It's we inherit the chachma, the wisdom, we call it wisdom, but we inherit the chachma of the divine soul. We inherit the ability to sense godliness, and that produces the love. Okay, so let's read it inside. Okay, we have a little Kabbalah here because basically there's 10 sphira, there's 10 divine attributes, but there's also 4 spiritual worlds. We're on the lowest world. We're really lower. We're the physical manifestation of the lowest world. There's 4 spiritual worlds, and then there's the physical manifestation of the lowest world. Each world has 10 sphirot. every soul comes from one of the worlds, some combination of one of the worlds, some of those sphirot in one of the worlds. So we're going to now list all the worlds, but the bottom line is we're going to say, even if you're on the lowest level of the lowest world, you still have the highest level, the chachma, the wisdom of the highest world, because they're all interconnected. That's going to be the Kabbalistic idea here that we're going to lay out. So here we go. Says Rabbi Shneur Zalman, the explanation is as follows. The patriarchs were truly the chariot of God. What does it mean they were chariot of God? We'll explain that in chapter 23. But now we just touch upon it. They were completely subservient to him and have no other will but the divine will. Just as a chariot has no will of its own, but is directed solely to the will of the rider. Therefore, in other words, because the patriarchs, that we're saying we inherited love from the patriarchs. The patriarchs didn't inherit it. They, through their service, become a chariot to God. Therefore, because of their service, they merited the privilege of drawing down for all subsequent generations of their descendants forever, a nefesh, ruach, and neshama, which is 3 names of the soul, from the 10 holy sfirot of the 4 worlds of Atzilut, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. In which of the 4 worlds and from which sephira within these worlds does the soul originate? Each individual according to his level and according to his deeds. In other words, every person is going to get nefesh, ruach, and neshama, just 3 levels of the soul that come from the 10 sfirot of one of the 4 worlds. Nevertheless, at any rate, even the unworthiest and most sinful Jews, draw down by their marital union, a nefesh from the level of nefesh of malchus da'asiyah, the attribute of royalty in the world of action. So we don't have to get into the details, but we're talking about the lowest world, which is asiyah. We're talking about the last sephira, which is malchut, and we're talking about the lowest level of soul of nefesh. So we're nefesh of malchut of asiyah, literally the lowest rung in holiness, right? This is the lowest level of holiness in the world of asiyah. So that's the worst case scenario. Your soul comes from the lowest level. Never yet, since malchut is one of the 10 holy sfirot, and since holiness is the realm of unity, where every level is comprised of all other levels perforce, in the lowest level of asiyah is compounded of all the other levels of asiyah, including chachma d'asiyah, wisdom of the world of asiyah, of the highest sphira of asiyah. Within chachma d'asiyah is closed chachma, the malchut d'atzilut, wisdom of royalty in the world of emanation. In chachma de malchus d'atzilut is clothed chachma d'atzilut. Since all the sphirot of Atzilus incorporate each other, which in turn is illuminated by the actual light of the blessed Ein Sof, as it is written, God in his wisdom founded the earth. I'm skipping, and it is further written, in wisdom you have made them all. What have we just done? We just mapped out the entire order of, not the entire, but a good part of the order of the evolution of the worlds. There's 4 spiritual worlds. The lowest world, the lowest sphere of the lowest world is Malchut of Asiyah. Malchut of Asiyah, the lowest sphere of the lowest world, incorporates within it the highest sphere of the lowest world, Chachma of Asiyah. Chachma of Asiyah incorporates within it the Chachma of Malchut of Atzilut. Chachma of Malchut Atzilut has Chachma d'Atzilut. Without getting into the names, the map is not important right now. What's important is that the lowest level is connected to the highest level. The highest level, Chachma of Atzilut, within it is the infinite light of God. Now, Rabbi Shneur Zalman doesn't elaborate upon it here. He does it elsewhere in the book, chapter 35. The difference between Chachma and Bina. Bina is what we would understand, we would call conventionally wisdom or understanding, intellectual comprehension. Chachma is not intellectual comprehension. Chachma is really a combination of 2 words. It isn't, you need it for intelligence, but it's not really understanding yet. It's pre-understanding. Chachma is 2 words. Chachma, the ability to sense the what. In other words, the curiosity, the openness to something that is beyond ourselves. That's what Chachma is. That's the capacity of Chachma. I don't think the animals have it. I don't think the cow eating lunch is concerned of curious about what is beyond itself. The human being has Chachma. It's an openness. It doesn't understand yet, but it's the ability to be open to something greater. According to the Kabbalah, that's where your ideas come from. Where does the idea emerge from? Where does it fall into your chachma? Where does it fall into your head from? It's not understanding. I don't understand it yet. Oh, that comes to sensing. You have the power to sense something beyond yourself. That's really what faith is. Faith is not understanding. If you understood it, it would be bina, not chachma. But chachma is the ability to be open to something that's beyond the self. That's why Rabbi Shneur Zalman says in multiple places in the Tanya, he says, where does the infinite light rest? It doesn't rest in bina, because bina is understanding. And you cannot understand the infinity. It's impossible. But the infinity of the Ein Sof, the infinite light, could rest in chachma, because chachma doesn't have to understand. Chachma could sense. Chachma could see. So that's what we're getting at. And after we gave the whole map for the Kabbalist, if you're not a Kabbalist, you can use the summary. What is the summary? Here we go. Thus, we see that the light of the blessed Ein Sof is garbed in the faculty of wisdom in the human soul of whatever sort of Jew he may be. In other words, I don't care who you are. I don't care what level, what Kabbalistic level you think you're on or you are on. Everybody has the infinite light enclosed in their chachma of their soul. Now, chachma is really the light of Ein Sof. Because chachma is the spark of infinity is in the chachma, and that spark of infinity then spreads to the rest of the 10 spheroid, to your whole personality. In turn, the soul's faculty of wisdom, together with the light of the blessed Ein Sof that is garbed in it, suffuses all the levels of the soul in its entirety, from head to foot, as it were, to animate them with godly vitality. As it is written, wisdom gives life to those who possess it. In other words, how does it work? We say everyone has a spark of God. What does it mean everyone has a spark of God? Everyone has 10 sefirot. Everyone has chachma. Chachma is the capacity to be open to what is beyond yourself. In that capacity to be open to what is beyond the self, you have the infinite light of God. So in a sense, you have infinity within your chachma, and from your chachma, it spreads to the rest of your personality. Now, we happen to say that before we said that there's different levels, and basically different people are in different levels, and therefore they bequeath to their children a different level of the soul, depending on what their level is. But now Rabbi Shneur Zalman says a very interesting paragraph, which he also said in chapter 2. It's not so clear. Sometimes the lower souls could actually give to their children very high souls. Right? It's not so ordinary. It's not predictable. At times, the sinners of Israel may even bring down for their children very lofty souls, which had been in the depths of the klipot, as it is explained in Sefer Gilgulim, which is the Sefer of the book of Rabbi Arizal, Rabbi Chaim Vital. I'm not going to get into that right now. Just don't think just because someone sinned, the soul he bequeaths to his child is on lower rungs of holiness. No, sometimes the sinners of Israel can get the higher souls. But that's a detail. That's in brackets. What we're saying here is it doesn't matter what soul you're from. Within yourself, you have chachma. Chachma is the highest sphera, the ability to be open to that which is beyond. Within the chachma is the infinite light of God. That's the first part. Usually the Tanya, there's no breaks. In the chapter, you get a full chapter. Here, there's a break. That's the first part. So what's the takeaway? Takeaway is we have to understand what's the hidden love. We have to understand how it's bequeathed to us. We have to understand what's the nature of this love. We have to understand how awe is included within it. 4 questions, like the Seder. These are the 4 questions. We didn't explain it. We're just starting. What did we say so far? I don't care who you are. You have, and you bequeath to your children. If you are a descendant of Abraham, you have or you bequeath to your children this level of that you have a soul from one of the 10 faculties of the 4 spiritual worlds. Now, if you have one, you have them all, because they're all interconnected. So the lowest level of Asiya, the lowest level of lowest world, has within it a spark from the highest level of the lowest world. That spark, that chachma, is related to the chachma of the highest worlds. Ultimately, chachma b'atzilut, ultimately it's got the infinite light of God within itself. So everybody has a spark of the Or and Sof hidden within its chachma. That's point 1. If we understand so far, we can continue. What are we going to say? This is the explanation why souls, people, Jews have the capacity to give up the life to God, even if they were not scholars, even if they were not knowledgeable, even if were not committed to Judaism. They were able to give up the life for God. Why? Because the Chachma was activated. So we talked about this when we talked about the binding of Isaac on Sunday. Every culture has people that are willing to give up their life for their ideas, for their beliefs, right? But there's a unique phenomenon within the Jewish people, is that people who did not necessarily believe throughout their life, people who did not necessarily live in a way consistent with the ideals that now they're giving up their life for, nevertheless, they had the capacity to give up their life for God. Why? It's not rational. It's not rational. So where does it stem from? It stems from Chachma. Chachma is beyond the Bina. Bina is understanding. Chachma is the openness to what is beyond. Okay. Here we go. We're getting a little Kabbalah here, the difference between Chachma and Bina, right? So now we gave you the placement. We told you that we're talking about Chachma. Everybody has Chachma, and in Chachma is the infinite light of Hashem. What is Chachma? Okay, we're making the progress. Now, Chachma, which as explained in chapter 3, is the initial flash of intellect, the nebulous seminal glimmer of an idea, is the source of intelligence and comprehension. It is higher than Bina, which is the faculty of understanding an idea and grasping it. In its relation to the soul's lower faculties, this single level of Chachma comprises two opposite aspects. On one hand, Chachma is above comprehension and understanding. Thus, it transcends the lower faculties of the soul. And it is the aspect of Chachma, and it is this aspect of Chachma which enables it to be the recipient of the light of the Ein Sof, as will soon be explained. While on the other hand, Chachma is the source of intelligence and comprehension and is thus connected to the lower faculties. Chachma is a bridge. The openness to what is beyond means it's separated from the other spherot, because the other spherot are what I understanding and what I feel. This is the openness to what is beyond me. Nevertheless, the openness to what is beyond me is actually the source to ultimately I'll be able to understand. So Chachma is the bridge. This etymological composition of the word Chachma indicates this dual nature. Chachma contains the two words koach ma, the faculty or the ability of the unknown, of what. Literally, ma means what. As one would ask if something cannot be comprehended, what is this? Hence, while it is an intellectual faculty and thus related to the other lower faculties, it is a faculty which cannot yet be comprehended or grasped by the intellect. For this reason, the light of the Ein Sof, blessed be He, who can in no way be comprehended by any thought, is vested in Chachma. Okay. Hence, all Jews, even the woman and the illiterate, what's even the woman? Because in those days, the women were knowledgeable, who have no knowledge of God's greatness, believe in God, since faith is beyond understanding and comprehension. Faith represents the ability to grasp that which the intellect cannot. For as scripture states, the fool believes everything, but the clever man understands. In other words, cleverness only grasps understanding. Faith grasps that which is beyond understanding. Conventionally people think, who believes? Faith is the belief for the people who cannot understand, they fall on faith. That's not what we're saying. We're saying there's only so much you could understand. And if I only accept what I understand, then my view of reality is capped by my wisdom. And now we know that even the secrets of creation, a person of natural world, a person cannot really understand. So faith is Chachma. After I understand everything I could understand, I could have a openness to see that as what is beyond myself. That is the Chachma, and that is faith. In relation to, so we quoted the verse that King David says, the fool believes everything. Okay. In relation to the Almighty, who is beyond intelligence and knowledge, and who can in no way be comprehended by any thought, all men are like fools before him. As it is written, King David says, I am foolish and ignorant. I am as a beast before you, and I am constantly with you. Very beautiful verse. What does he say? Meaning that because I approach you as a fool and a beast, i.e. through the irrational power of faith, precisely therefore and thereby I am constantly with you. If King David would say, I'm very wise, and I understand God, which he did to a degree, that doesn't mean you're near God, because ultimately God is unknowable. But King David says, because I'm like a fool, because I recognize that I can't understand you, and I need faith, that's why I can relate to you, because you defy understanding. Okay, so now we said a little bit what Chachma is. Now is the takeaway. Therefore, as a rule, even the most worthless of the worthless, that's a bad translation, nobody's worthless. Kal means the opposite of reverence. Even the people who have no reverence to God whatsoever. So Kal Shabakam, he says worthless of worthless, I don't know why he translates that. And the sinners among Israel, sacrifice their lives for the sanctity of God's name and suffer harsh torture rather than deny God's unity, even if they be boors and illiterate who are ignorant of God's greatness. Even the little knowledge that they do possess is not what motivates them, for they do not delve into it at all. They don't sit and meditate, so that by no means that their self-sacrifice results from any knowledge or contemplation of God. Rather, they are prepared to sacrifice their lives without any knowledge or reflection, but as though it were absolutely impossible to renounce the one God without any reason or rational argument whatsoever. You take a Jew who's about to sacrifice his life for God and you say, does this make sense to you? If he says yes, that's not self-sacrifice. The whole idea here is that this is that's not stemming from understanding. It's stemming from a deeper place than understanding. What is that? It's stemming from the fact that within their heart, they have the infinite light of God within their chachma, and therefore they will not do anything to separate from Hashem. Now, chapter 19 is going to explain, we'll get that in a second. This is so because the one God illuminates and animates the entire soul through being clothed in the faculty of chachma, which is beyond any graspable knowledge or intelligence. So that's what we're doing today. What did we establish today? That's the end of chapter 18. What did we establish? We established that every single soul, every Jewish soul, no matter where you're from, no matter where you come from in the map and evolution of the worlds, even if you think that you're nefesh to nefesh, you're the lowest level of nefesh, of the lowest sephira, of the lowest world. Nevertheless, because in holiness, everything is interrelated, you have within you a little bit of the wisdom of Atzilut, the highest level of the highest world. And Chachma, the highest level of Atzilut, has within it, is open to what is beyond. Therefore, there's a spot, that's where the infinity of God rests. In short, every single soul has a spark of God within it, enclosed within its chachma. And you want to see the application? The application of that is that a person could sacrifice their life for God without meditation, without understanding, without comprehension. He's not doing it because of meditation. He's not doing it because he understands the greatness of God. Why is he doing it? Because the infinite light of God spreads to the entire personality through the chachma. That's the beautiful picture we're painting. The only problem is, so how come I don't feel it all the time? For that you're going to read chapter 19. But this concept will always stand. And as we said earlier, essentially what we're going to do, just to summarize the summary, essentially what we're going to do in the next chapters, we're going to say, this spark is asleep until it's threatened. When is it threatened? When it's threatened that it's going to lose its connection to God. If I can understand that every mitzvah, my relationship with God is at stake, I will activate the chachma of my soul, and I will be able to approach this mitzvah with tremendous dedication and passion that originates from the chachma of my soul. Usually my chachma is asleep, but I can wake it up. How? You got to come back the next couple of weeks. Okay, go ahead, Karina, please.
Okay. Now, my question is, I understand this and I feel it, I sense it, but my question is, where is this idea about the self-sacrifice for God comes from? Talking about the book and at the time that writing this book, is this something it was there was evidence about this? You know what I mean?
The reality is that if you look at the history of Jews in Eastern Europe, with a small, even the Jews in Eastern Europe, for the past at least 1,000 years before this book was written, that many times in many countries, both Eastern Europe and Western Europe, both for people who were learned and not learned, rich and poor, there were unfortunately many uncountable scenarios where people were put to death because of their connection to God, to Judaism. And if they would just decide to convert, to renounce their connection to God, they would be spared. This is a historical fact. Now, what percentage of the people was it? 80% or 70% that made the choice? I don't know. It depends on the scenario, it depends on the place. Even in the Spanish Inquisition, in Spain, where many people, for the first time in history, many people decided to convert instead of instead of expulsion or losing their life, even then. So first of all, that was an anomaly. That was in Jewish history, that was the exception. But even those people, when they themselves were the Marranos, when they themselves were ultimately, if they were caught and they were given the choice to renounce their connection to God and spare their life, many of them did not. Even though they were converted, many of them would now not renounce their connection to God. So I'm not a historian, but just a little bit of Jewish history throughout beginning from the Crusades. That was Eastern Europe, and that was Western Europe. Beginning from the Crusades in the 11th century, this was a phenomenon. And the point here is it crossed cultures, it crossed ages, it crossed levels of knowledge. And that's a phenomenon of Jewish history, certainly Ashkenazic Jewish history, Sephardic as well. But fortunately for the Sephardim, they did not live under such harsh oppression. Even when they had some periods, but it wasn't as harsh as the Ashkenazic oppression. But that's Jewish history in Europe in the past 1,000 years on one foot.
Okay.
Go ahead, Bob, please.
My comment is more of a comment, less of a question. I mean, it's ironic to me that Judaism, which prides itself on continuing education and study and academia, always comes down to, Na'aseh v'nishma, chokim, blind faith, chachma over bina. I mean, it's wild in my mind that, that we spend so much of our time trying to follow the book and understand, and yet the bottom line is that blind faith or chokim or na'aseh v'nishma is so important.
Yes. So I can answer that from an emotional perspective, from an intellectual perspective. And that answer, it's not a question. I can respond to that from many different ways. But the reality is your description is absolutely correct. And it comes from what the Jewish philosophers would say is tachlit hayediyah shelo nedayacha. The ultimate knowledge is to recognize that we can't know God. That's ultimately, the smarter you are in any field, the people who think they know everything, some people think they know everything. Okay, so they have some amount of knowledge. The real expert knows how much more there is to know. So ultimately, the ultimate knowledge is that we cannot understand the infinity. Now, so just go faith. Why do you have to have understanding? So the reason for that, at least from the Hasidic perspective, is because God gave us intelligence, and intelligence is our highest faculty. God wants us to bring the holiness to our intelligence. Could you imagine if we only had faith but we didn't understand? That means our relationship with God remains in Chachma, but does not permeate our personality. It's not internalized because faith is not internalized. It's not how I see the world. And therefore, we are, in a sense, living this duality. On one hand, we do everything we could to understand. And when we understand, what we're doing is we're actually internalizing, because without understanding, you cannot internalize. Yet, we understand that there's a limit of our understanding. And that's Rabbi Shneur Zalman who founded Chabad. It's all about, he said, everything in the Kabbalah, everything in mysticism must be understood and explained. That was the premise of the movement. And he got a lot of heat from his friends. A lot of his friends opposed him. They said, you cannot really understand and seek to explain God. God is unknowable. And it's about faith, and it's about joy, and it's about love. Why are you writing a book with 53 chapters? In other words, why are you sitting and trying to explain? And the answer is that God is unknowable, and yet we have to strive to know him. And we have to understand the limitations, and therefore there's chachma, there's bina, and you need both. And one without the other doesn't work. So I agree with everything you're saying. So I hope it wasn't a question, because I don't have an answer. Guilty as charged.
That was
Guilty
exactly
as charged. I'm guilty. We agree. The confession.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yes, you're right. You're right. Go ahead, Vicky.
I want to comment first on the prior discussion. Not only understand, but derive pleasure from trying to understand.
Yes, that's the process.
That's the process. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's triggered by the chachma of godly soul. But my question was about the
It's a joke.
interaction.
It reminds me of a kid. You study the Talmud, and then there's the comments on the side. There's Rashi, and there's Tosafot, the additional commentaries. And Tosafot, they always have questions. Every piece of Talmud, they just find questions, contradictions to other parts of the Talmud, et cetera, et cetera. So the kid in the third grade is starting to study Talmud. He comes home and his father says, "Do you understand the Talmud?" He says, "No, but don't worry, I'm a good company." Tosafos also doesn't understand the Talmud. I don't understand the Talmud, and Tosafos doesn't understand the Talmud. Yeah, that's the difference. One person, you have the bina, and then you reach the limit of capacity, or you're doing nothing. Okay, fine.
Yeah, but my question was, how does chachma of the godly soul, if any, there is any interaction with the chachma of the animal soul? Or for example, person grew up in an environment where they manipulated his chachma of animal soul, saying that there is no God.
Right.
And so how is it ever addressed? Because even if the hidden love exists somewhere, but sometimes even using the fear, which is sometimes stronger than love,
Right.
even using fear does not cannot wake up.
I think we should come back to that question. We should come back to that question when we finished at least chapter 19, because chapter 19 will go into this, when it's asleep and when it's awake. But what I do want to talk about is, yes, the animal soul has chachma. Animal soul has the ability to be curious. The animal soul has the ability to sense what is beyond itself. Right? And there's no question about that. What the animal does not have soul, it doesn't sense the infinite light. Right? The godly soul senses what's beyond itself as the infinite light of God. So if you ask the godly soul, knock, knock, what's in your chachma? You sense something is beyond. What is beyond? They're going to sense godliness. The animal soul, which senses something is beyond. I mean, the animal soul has a different problem because its center of gravity. We spoke about this earlier in chapter 9. The center of gravity of the godly soul is the mind. The center of gravity of the animal soul is the heart. So, in other words, yes, it has chachma, but the chachma is usually at the service of itself. I want to explore. I want to go to the moon. I want to explore. Why? Because I want to become famous. Right? So in other words, yes, you're curious. Yes, you're open, but ultimately it's rooted in subjectivity. But nevertheless, yes, there's no question that the godly soul, Zelu Matzah, we quoted the verse, God created one mirroring the other, meaning the unholiness mirrors the holiness, and that the holiness has the capacity of chachma. The unholiness also has the capacity of chachma, and it's used to create great things. It got us out of the caves, and it got us to the internet age. A wonderful thing, right? But when they sense something is beyond, does it sense the infinity of the Ein Sof? No, that it can't sense.
And sometimes it can be in conflict then.
Yeah, but once the chachma wakes up of godly soul, if you can wake it up, everything else pales in comparison because the sensing is so powerful. Now, sometimes the people can live even at the threat of losing their connection to God. Sometimes the chachma is not awakened. Why that is, I don't know. We'll talk about it next week, maybe. But the point here is we don't have to explain why the Jew doesn't give up his life. We have to explain the phenomenon that Jews would, and not intellectual Jews, and not Jews that were learned, and not Jews that were devoted to God in their lifetime. The phenomenon is too broad to classify it to one type of Jew. It spans time, it spans countries, it spans cultures. So this is a phenomenon, even if it doesn't happen every day, where does this emerge from? Where does this capacity come from? So we're saying part of my soul senses this connection to God and cannot be disconnected from God, right? Going back to the metaphor, if I understood that my relationship to my child is at stake, all other considerations are off the table. Not always do I feel that. Right? That's the metaphor. I think that's, for me, that's the metaphor. We live in the modern world. We don't think about self-sacrifice. But like I said, for me, what works is if I tell myself, I don't want to do what my child wants me to do right now. But if I want to do it, if I want motivation, I just tell myself, it's possible that this is what they're going to remember of their childhood. Because remember, what do I remember of my childhood? Random things. And if I told my parents, if in real time my parents knew exactly what I'm going to remember, maybe they would act differently. They acted very good. Don't worry, I had a blessed childhood. But I'm just saying it's a really scary thought because I think about this and I get scared. You want to know where the oil comes in. I said, we just had an interaction. If this is what my child remembers of their childhood, I'm in trouble, right? But the bottom line is, if you sense that your relationship with someone you love is at stake, then you're going to operate very differently. And all other thoughts and considerations and chachma of nefesh elokis and curiosity of the animal soul, I really want to know what's on the next page of this book, or how this episode ends on the TV, or how the ice cream is going to taste at the bottom of the ice cream cone. Because you know the problem, I ate one lick of ice cream, it's good, but maybe the next one will be tastier. So I keep going. Yeah, with all the other considerations, all other curiosities, all other faculties of the soul will fall away to the strength of that love that was hidden, because a second earlier I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do that for my child, so I'm not interested. I have my own desires. But my relationship is at stake. This may be what you're going to remember of this relationship. Oh, I'm here for you. And not only it doesn't take self-sacrifice. It doesn't take self-sacrifice. It doesn't take a work. I'm not suppressing myself. All other considerations are irrelevant. And take that Jew giving up the life for God. You say, why giving up your life for God? Do you understand? Say, you crazy? I would rather not. You have a choice: give up your life or convert. If it's a choice, I would convert. The problem is I have no choice. That's how we looked at it. That's how Chachma looks at it. It's not an intellectual decision. It makes no sense. I'd rather convert if I could.
Thank you. So
I once heard Manas Friedman say, your idol is very cute. It's a very cute idol. It's much cuter than the other idols. If I want, I would take it if I could. But I can't. That's the point here. I can't, because everything else is insignificant compared to that part of my soul, the chachma of my godly soul.
I understand. Thank you very much. So basically, it comes down to the target audience. The target audience has to be concerned for Tanya, has to be concerned how to awaken. But I already told you
what the Hasidim say. The Hasidim say
but
that
if somebody
Tanya will awaken it, right? Because everybody is sensing, everybody is searching. The problem is nobody knows what they're searching for. Then when you study the Tanya, you say, now I understand. Now this resonates. Tanya resonates. And therefore, people who don't know they're searching is because we're talking on a different, think about a radio wave. You know, you have to tune into the right, you've sensed something, but you have to tune into the right station. In other words, you have to touch the soul on its language. You have to talk to it the language that it recognizes. And that's what Torah does, Torah in general, but specifically the secrets of Torah, specifically the inner interpretation of Torah. Right? That's the story in short. Okay, everyone have a wonderful Shabbos. And next week, we're not going to meet, I think, because we're going to be busy burning the chametz. And the following week is going to be also be Yom Tov. We can't be on the computer. So we're going to take a 2-week break. And then we'll return back to the Tanya, chapter 19. So I'm just pulling up the calendar here. So next Friday is the 15th. That's the day before Passover. Not going to work. The next one is the 7th-day Passover. We can't study Torah on the computer. So we're going to get back to this chapter 2019 on April 29th. So we have a long time to think about this chapter. Now, obviously, you don't have to wait for me. You can go back and you can review on Chabad.org. You can look at all the chapters up till now, and there's all kinds of summaries and classes. So you got plenty of work to do. Okay. Wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.